the world is constantly changing, growing, new things happening, you're not ever going to be able to get to that perfect data set. So it's what's going to deliver that kind of 80-20 of what you need for right now, and making sure that you have a team that's supporting the rest of the functions of the business to be able to get a hold of that where they need it.
Welcome to the CX Equation, a podcast by TAP CXM.
We share actionable insights and real-world case studies to equip you with the tools you need to drive loyalty, engagement, and sustainable growth.
We're your hosts, Chantelle Casey
and Mark Clydesdale. Welcome to the CX Equation. Today we're joined by James, Gent and Neil Hughes, both of whom work with us at TAP CXM and bring a wealth of experience working with leading brands to design and deliver marketing technology solutions that drive measurable value. Today we're going to get their insights on 2025 and look ahead at what trends, technologies and lessons are likely to shape this year ahead. So, Neil, James, hello and welcome.
Just to kick us off then, let's take a bit of a rewind, back having a look over the past year. What are the things that you've noticed most in the way that marketing teams work, which have changed over the last year?
For me personally, I think there's been a real kind of focus on value. So kind of a bit more of a grown-up approach to proving ROI for spend on technology and on resources. That's definitely a pattern I've kind of spotted when talking with clients, looking to either kind of consolidate their technology spend where it kind of grows a little bit organically, either through their own kind of M&A purchases or just directly from kit that's been bought by different departments, different teams, where there may be some kind of overlap. So I think this year for me has been one of kind of checks and balances on how companies spend. And I think that kind of chimes a little bit with the consumer market at the moment, personally.
I think that comes in with like people reviewing operational processes as well and seeing where they can save money in those areas with new assessing, their MarTech stack comes with assessing operational stuff as well. So I think we've definitely seen a trend in that this year.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've been working on quite a few projects that are consolidation of tech. People want to simplify what they're using, rationalize what they're using as well. And I think it's trying to get, certainly in larger businesses, people doing things in a way that's common, standardized. And I'm sure we'll get onto it in a second. But if you're looking to layer in things like AI technology, then having a centralized platform, data in one place, all of those good things to be able to leverage the latest technology that's being released. I think a lot of businesses are still trying to work out what's the best way for them to set up themselves from a technology perspective, and people and process around that as well.
In sort of reevaluating or reassessing their MarTech stack comes with cutting out a lot of the noise. Like in a lot of these legacy platforms our clients work with, there's a lot of unnecessary, redundant processes that are actually giving them much of a return.
I'd say the last 2 or 3 years now, we've been seeing big international global businesses certainly centralizing technology more, trying to have a standardized set of licenses and technologies that they know that each of their regions or brands can use, that are a leading bit of enterprise technology that provides the capability that they need, trying to move to common data structures. And it's all in the drive for better knowledge sharing, better cost efficiency, better kind of quality control. I think the bit that's interesting to then get the balance is if as a global team, global function, global business, you're trying to centralize the data and the technology, how much freedom is still allowing the regions to work within that. So because people in your marketing teams in your regions will know the customers and the trends in that region better than any centralized team. So I think it's important that even if we're trying to save cost and make it easier to use technology, we've still got to then empower teams using it in the local places to actually deliver the best customer experience.
Yeah, and I think a lot of businesses we've been working with are going through reorganizations, and people are having to do a lot more with a lot less as well. So being able to rationalize their processes and really look inwards and see how they can better use what they've got to get at least the same output or more. I think that's where it's going to be interesting to see how people can maximize that tech they've now invested in, and really generate that ROI that's been promised so far. Because I think a lot of the time business cases are put in place, but to actually get to that golden nugget of understanding what the business value is the hardest bit. And I think next year is probably going to be a year of reckoning to see, are they going to get that value that has been promised this year through the investment that's been made throughout 2025.
Yeah, definitely. That could be more interesting when people are looking at kind of best of breed and composable spec as well. I've seen people that have bought, certain large clients that have bought all of the kit and the tools and plugged them all together, but now they're having to make some decisions on, right, well, which ones of these are core or the spine of our stack, and which ones may we have to actually lose to just kind of save a bit of kind of license cost across the board, and therefore then looking at some of these tools to pick up the slack, or some of the teams to then pick up the slack. If a kind of function isn't there before, then maybe it goes into the design department or something like that.
For the non-technologists in the room, what do we mean by a composable stack?
I think it's a bit of a false premise in some regards. So over the years, from a sort of sales point of view, some of the technology vendors have kind of come together under kind of banners like the Mac Alliance, and where they are kind of technology that should be simple and easy to plug into each other, doesn't tie you into one vendor, and doesn't tie you into kind of a lot of features and functionality that you don't necessarily need. So the idea being that you buy the best in breed for a particular purpose and plug it into more of that. And then if you do need a kind of mobile measurement platform, then you buy the best one there, plug it into your stack. That's great. If you don't need it, you don't buy it and you don't pay for it. But the kind of the slight point that they don't necessarily like to make a big deal of is that most of the hubs have come from this kind of approach anyway. They just ended up buying the best of breed tool or a similar type of tool and integrating it into their stack. Unfortunately, that integration is not always brilliant, and isn't always the best tool. So really, you've got to kind of, if you're an enterprise business, you've got to weigh up that kind of trade-off, basically. But it can introduce more vendors and more admin overhead in that regard.
Yeah, I guess with that is the trade-off that the complexity is shifted to sort of internal systems, or like the integration layer between all of those systems, and obviously added complexity of handling multiple platforms and the governance around that and things like that. There's a trade-off there. Yeah,
there's definitely a feeling that you just use a key and plug it in and off you go. That's every sales guy's pitch, but we know from the hard yards that it's not always as easy as that.
I know we don't want to get into specific vendors, but when you say like the hubs, we're talking about the big Adobes and Salesforces of this world. For me, a few years ago, every client I worked with would be on Adobe or Salesforce, really. Yeah, certainly any large company, whereas it does feel like there is more competition now.
I've seen more of a trend in use case driven sort of tech investment or implementation, rather than just going with the Big Bang Theory sort of what's the word I'm looking for? People wanting to prove the value of a platform before, jumping the gun and moving over. And I think that's easier to do with these sort of more specific platforms rather than the big players.
Yeah, I think certainly seeing other platforms grow alongside Adobe and Salesforce. So the likes of Braze recorded another 25% growth year on year recently. But yeah, to Braze almost at $1 billion annual recurring revenue now, 25% year on year growth. I think the interesting part is previously people were doing a lot more in the tools, like with Adobe Campaign or Salesforce Marketing Cloud. There's been a lot more investment earlier on in the data chain, let's call it. So people are spending more on Snowflake, Databricks, and then doing more of the data work up front, which means that you don't need such a heavyweight marketing automation tool later on. And you've got more of a flat customer profile that's bringing in events that are being attached to that customer profile, which is a different way more people were working in the past with tools like Adobe Campaign and Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So we've seen that evolution of the stack. So certainly there's been the growth of those types of tools. Adobe have Adobe Journey Optimizer, which is a bit more similar. I think the marketing automation tool capability. I think what's going to be interesting there is, journey tools, marketing automation tools, essentially their orchestration engine. There's going to be more overlap with this central agent orchestration layer that's going to live in the stack now going forward. So I think the architecture is evolving right now to have the agent capability built in, and it's not yet clear how much of that is going to replace what's being done in the marketing automation tools versus what will be done within that new agent orchestration layer.
That kind of goes hand in hand with the trend we've seen more of clients and companies wanting their marketing teams to have more autonomy, and the vendors have gone in line with that as well. So a lot more marketing friendly platforms where they don't need to have the level of technical knowledge that previously they would have had to have on the likes of Adobe and Salesforce. So I think we've seen that coming through in the products as well, and also in the requirements from our clients when they're looking at new software.
Clients are expected to be technical in certain other ways, like back in the day, I don't know many kind of customer marketing folk that would know what an API was or an SDK or, these kinds of things. But some of these newer challenger vendors have brought some of this terminology in, and the kind of lay marketer kind of knows that a little bit more now, less about normalizing your database structures and your tables within the actual product. And I think James hit on a really good point about the fact that, Adobe and Salesforce have been through this kind of this maturity curve, and they just reached a point where they plateaued slightly in a kind of SQL-based, all data in the platform approach to delivery. And they were the best, both of those were the best of breed at doing that. There was just a bit of an architectural shift, which was more sort of microservices, web, smaller packets of information and data being passed around as events. So what they've done is kind of the onboarding journeys. They've made clients sort of say, if you want to take advantage of the capability, you want it to be super easy for marketers, you reduce down your data model, you make it very simple with a customer profile and with events, and therefore it is simpler, and you can make the UI then cleaner, easier, and that for a marketer is great. Where it becomes problematic is once the vendor kind of goes off the pitch after onboarding, and you've got a data engineering function that's moved elsewhere and is focusing on other things, that the next bit of data or the thing that you forgot to ask for in onboarding, you want to get into the platform. And that's where you can reach a bit of a plateau as well with some of these modern tools. But you're right, the kind of AI element to it is like, where is that going to live? Who's going to own that within the business? And what does your infrastructure need to look like in order to make that happen? Is going to be a key thing for 2026.
AI is the big elephant in the room at the moment, isn't it? So just on that, is it all hype, or is there actual practicality? Are we seeing actual practicality to Agentic AI and Gen AI or whatever is in the MarTech landscape? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. A few things have come out over the last month or so in our industry. So we've got the MarTech report that's produced by Scott Brinker. They were talking about Agentforce. I think 18,500 deals closed in 2025 for people buying Agentforce, and the annual recurring revenue has now gone to 500 million just for Agentforce. There's other revenue on top of that, which is Agentforce capabilities on top of other Salesforce stack. You can't really quite see any Adobe numbers yet. It's they've got this new metric in there, which is AI influence, which is showing that they're building in AI to the products everywhere, and they're showing that that's now attached to, I think it's about a third of their revenue, but they're looking to try and get that up to 100% of their revenue as everything is attached to AI. So I think what that shows is people are buying the tech, they're starting to use it, but I'm not convinced yet we're at the point that we've been able to demonstrate the value that's been promised from the capability. I think it's also interesting reading things like Reddit's what they're called, subreddits, the forums to show what people on the ground who are using the technology actually are thinking about. And I think like with Agent Force and other capabilities, everyone was saying what's being demoed is just the very top of the iceberg, and it looks very great and very shiny, but actually what sits underneath that, if that's in a real world production organization, it's not actually realistic to be able to produce those use cases yet. So there's a lot of infrastructure and underlying work that needs to be done to be able to get to that value. And I think that's borne out by, say, Salesforce buying Informatica during the year as well, where they're heavily investing in data infrastructure to make sure that people have got that capability to be able to get the data in the right place in a clean way. And so I see this as like a foundational year where people are putting in place the capability to try and get to the value. I'm hoping in 2026 that we'll start to actually see some of that value being borne out through some more real life case studies, because I think there's a lack of real life case studies at the moment. A lot of it is sales demos still built on synthetic data and not real data at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I've heard instances of like 2026 where large enterprise clients want to kind of test having a CRM agent team versus their own in-house team. It's slightly scary that we're going to be competing directly against the machines in some sort of Squid Game style, but it is where the market feels like it's going a little bit. But that, to James's point, can lead to a bit of a trough of disillusionment if it doesn't quite meet the needs or it's too difficult to get off the ground. So yeah, there's been a lot of proof of concept, a lot of showing how this could influence, but most of it is, from what I've seen, is going into efficiency gains in production, and like you said earlier, being able to do more with less. And that seems to be the place where people are focusing most and getting the most success at the moment. But I think a lot of that is opening up the infrastructure so that the agents can operate in an autonomous manner. And so some of the kind of seeding ground to some challenger vendors in certain areas, that could be because Salesforce might have their eye more on the end game of AI agents itself as they see it. And maybe they don't mind that having some of their share kind of eaten away in that area.
But yeah, I think it's definitely the internal like content production or internal production of marketing assets, and has been where the gain has been shown so far. But I don't know if you guys saw, there was the AI Turing Test that Lloyds Bank and Ogilvy did recently, where it pitted against 3 different teams together. So there was human only, AI only, and then human and AI. And then they were all given a brief to then go away and respond to a campaign and produce the assets and produce the campaign. And it showed that clearly that humans plus AI produced a better output across a few different categories. I think one was strategy, creativity, and I forget the other ones. But and the AI only underperformed against the human only from the overall output. It produced way more content, but it just didn't perform to the same level for the end output. So it's essentially just producing a lot of slop, which we're seeing at the moment. And you have to have the human plus AI part of it to be able to get the value, which I think is great to see that, because I think over the last year or so, there's been a lot of noise about cutting out teams or resources to replace it with AI. But I think we all know now at this point, we've all played with it long enough to know that it's just really not at that point where we can do that.
That is very interesting.
I was going to say the concern there is some CEOs have maybe jumped the gun in shedding staff, or they haven't quite got the learning on their models internally kind of fully trained from the experts before they're saying maybe we don't need you anymore. So I think there might be a little bit of a rowback on that in some places.
Well, I did see a cartoon on Instagram that was, who are we? CEOs. What do we want? AI. What do we want it to do? We don't know. When do we want it? Now. And I do think what frustrates me is AI is a huge area, right? And there's an obfuscation being taken advantage of by companies. So back to new tech vendors, everything now is powered by AI, and everything says powered by AI. But what does it mean? And unless you really understand what you're getting, it's almost just being sucked into this new thing. And we have clients ask us like, what's an AI strategy? What should our AI strategy be? How should we use AI? And it's kind of a meaningless question. Using AI isn't an outcome. I would like to see the trend move back towards the use cases and the things that we're trying to do. So, as you've just said, like, James, the idea of an agent being able to, effectively what we're saying is automate personalized testing faster, right? I can't get humans to come up with all of these different test ideas and put them into practice and measure the result in a really kind of quick real-time way, figure out the best one and then kind of run with it. Agents can very much help us, but it's not like, great, I'm using agents. It's great, I'm doing more automated personalization testing. I worked with a telco last year that was using the power of large language models to enter their brand guidelines and their legal and compliance guidelines, and then that to read the marketing that marketers were producing and checking that the content met the brand guidelines and met the legal guidelines. And the AI could come back and say, I'm not clear whether you've applied the promotional discount in the price that you've given me. Please, can you be clearer about that? And so that's a process automation benefit, right? Where I can now very, very quickly just make sure that there's a quality assurance to all of my marketing. So I would like to see us moving more towards what am I trying to do? What am I trying to do more quickly, more powerfully? Because it's not the case of all of a sudden AI is just going to start writing all of the content that we send straight to a customer without human oversight, as your example's just been, James. It's going to kind of come out with slop, and I absolutely, at this point in time, I wouldn't trust it to write something to a customer that I don't then see beforehand. But then you've got, we've had machine learning for a long time. Machine learning is technically part of AI. You will have technology vendors come along now, and there's a tiny bit of the platform that does a bit of machine learning, and it's AI powered so that they can jump on the hype bandwagon. And I think we've got to be much clearer about what are those use cases that we're actually doing and why they add value to the business, rather than it just be about using AI.
Yeah. And actually that makes it so much easier to prove the value of it as well, rather than just having that open-ended question.
Yeah, for me, there needs to always, well, not always, but mostly for a successful kind of application of AI, there needs to be a problem that you're trying to solve that you know reasonably well. Some of the best ones I've seen with clients that I've worked with, like, a train company that has cows on the line that can cause problems and, can have impacts on their commercial business, on passenger kind of experience and things like that, stock levels of food and kind of waste in a kind of moving towards carbon neutral kind of society. The idea that you can use AI to solve those kinds of problems is actually helpful, but just having an open-ended goal of applying AI is not actually particularly useful. And to your point about like LLMs, I did a artificial intelligence elective at university in 1997. This is not new stuff. It's got a real wave of sales and marketing behind it. And I've seen, a lot of vendors just rebadging something that they already had, which was some kind of model scoring mechanisms as to an AI suite. And it simply isn't really.
Okay, yeah. So a healthy dose of cynicism, I think, is helpful. But it's also, I think we're in a place where it's amazing how quickly you get used to some of this technology as well. And, been part of quite a few demos this year where people are demoing AI capability. And already you can just sort of see people like, okay, that looks great. But when you think about what we had like a few years ago, you think, this is amazing. We've actually got our hands now for, particularly, looking at how you might be able to use prompts to generate a whole workflow, and you can do that via an NCP server and not have to actually go into a tool, for example, and it can try and upfront understand what's going to be the best way to A/B test before you even send something out based on the data it holds, and all this stuff. I still find is just pretty impressive, but it's amazing how quickly you get used to it. And but I think in our industry we do lean towards being quite cynical about this stuff, because we're used to the sales messages and we have to develop it. But I think there's still a degree of magic to it as well. I think it's going to be amazing to build more of this stuff next year and see how we can actually build it out for clients and get some value from it. Because I think it's an amazing opportunity for us to make some massive changes, particularly on the. I think there's the distinction between how you're using it internally versus how you're using it for the end customer, or how the end customer is using it. I think how the end customer uses it obviously carries greater risk, and there's brand reputation and trust issues there that you need to make sure you're not going to erode any brand trust you've built over the years by suddenly allowing some agent capability on the customer that doesn't do what it's supposed to do. But internally, I think there's a massive opportunity to just improve the workflow and the way people are working with the technology we've been working with for a number of years. And I think we're at that point now where you can literally come up with an idea and produce then the assets and produce the workflow and test things in a matter of hours, whereas before it used to take weeks and weeks. So I think we're already at that point where you can produce things at a lightning speed, but it's having that quality control and making sure you're not producing crap at the end of it that is actually going to be the key thing here. And that will be how we can make sure there's that layer of sense check and making sure that what's being produced actually is going to deliver the results you want.
Yeah, the guardrails are important, aren't they?
I think there's definitely, depending what industry you work in, the use cases for AI change as well. And James, I like that you've just said about the way that the end customer's using it. So let's pick on travel and hospitality for a moment. I think there was a report earlier this year that now it was a relatively small number. It was about 4% of consumers are now asking ChatGPT to plan their holiday for them. But then if you look at kind of the demographic breakdown, in younger audiences, it might be more like 10% who are asking ChatGPT to plan their holiday for them. So then as a travel and hospitality company, I guess there's a few questions there. How can I be part of that? How can I pick up on what consumers are asking for and understand how I can then better serve their needs because I know what they want? How can I get them to come to me to ask me, my company, to plan their holiday for them, which might be through some form of large language model or some integration with ChatGPT myself or another potential model. But so, and there's a whole area of, we used to go and speak to people as travel agents and they would help us plan our holidays, right? Young people don't want to do that. They also don't want to do ends and ends of Google searches for it. So how do I provide the user a tool that I, as the travel and hospitality company, trust from a brand reputation point of view that can help them plan their holiday and just overall enhance that experience? So depending what industry you're in as well, there are lots of different benefits. I think we need to be getting to that specificity as to how is this going to help my business and how is it going to help my consumer?
Yeah, it's a whole new kind of area of marketing that's sprung up, hasn't it? This sort of GEO side of things with generative content. You're going to have to really define a content approach that's specific for that kind of engine of optimization, if you like. So it's not 100% different from what already exists. It's about providing good quality content, being a trusted source of information and somewhere that people would naturally go to investigate, and then making that content available in the right kind of formats and structures where it can be easily consumed. But you're going to have less control over that at the start, and there's going to be a real kind of gold rush of people working out how to do that to the best ability to kind of please the agents that are kind of doing that legwork on behalf of the consumer. So that it's going to be an interesting kind of journey, but I think you can probably pick up a lot of good habits from how you've been managing your content before, but you may get punished a little bit on kind of old and invalid content or poor quality content being available, which you don't then necessarily have control over, that the agent is going and picking up and utilizing, and then that will be frustrating for an end user if it's not good quality for them.
Sticking to the AI point, and then again, even maybe with travel and hospitality, as an example. One of the most challenging parts of any of this is getting the data in a good enough quality that any testing I'm trying to do, any learnings that I'm trying to teach something, that the data is available and the data is of good quality. I think Adobe released a report maybe last year or early this year that said travel and hospitality companies tend to be broken down into their products or their departments, and the data is disparate depending on what sort of holiday you've booked in the past. And because I can't unify that customer profile, my ability to then use AI as a concierge or something like that is limited. And we've always known, bad data in, bad result out, right? So data will continue to be a sticking point. How do you think we'll see companies kind of trying to react to that and further enhancing what they have in terms of a clean, compact, integrated set of data on customers?
I think there's always these new roles or terms that are coming up. Like before we had a prompt engineer, and there's like a go-to-market engineer. I think the latest one is now a context engineer. But I think the key thing is if you've got an agent or you've got an orchestration layer that's got several agents, it's not just having the data, but it's also having the right data in the right context. And I think we're going to see more of that capability, where in the past it might have been that everyone was trying to get a single customer view or that golden record. And a lot of companies still haven't been able to get to that nirvana because they've got so many different silos of data all over the place. And it might just need a different solution to actually bring the right context to LLM or whatever tool or agent is doing the reasoning based on that context or the data. Then there might just need to be a centralized, let's call it a context engineering team, but some team or some people who are responsible for making sure that the right data, the right context, and the right knowledge base is available. So I don't know if you guys have, if you built out your own AI agents or built out anything, most of all the tools you can use you can build different workflows and you can do different things, but it all comes back to what is the knowledge base it's got access to, what is the context, and what's the quality of that context. And so that's the key thing, and being able to make sure you can bring in that right context at the right time to then make sure the output is relevant and consistent. That's going to be the bit to crack that people are trying to do. So I think it is a data problem, but it's also then a context problem of making sure that it's got the right context based on whatever data is available to that.
Yeah, I mean, chatbots used to just rely on your FAQs kind of data repository, basically, and try and essentially automate that. It's like that on kind of steroids, that it's really the next level. But having perfect data in every context is an aspiration that everyone has, but very few people are going to get anywhere near it. So it's how can you get as close to that as possible with the resources that you have. And I think, the world is constantly changing, growing, new things happening. You're not ever going to be able to get to that perfect data set. So it's what's going to deliver that kind of 80-20 of what you need for right now. And making sure that you have a team that's supporting the rest of the functions of the business to be able to get hold of that where they need it.
And to your point earlier around some of this stuff's been available for years anyway, I think what we're seeing is just generally now that people are moving or looking to move away from a traditional if this then that type logic, and it's moving to now more of a reasoning logic. We're seeing that people are now looking more and more at, okay, what is the decisioning and what should be doing the decisioning, where should that live, and what technology should we have? So I see that as definitely a trend at the moment. It's something that I think will continue as people trying to work out where that should sit. Should we have more than one decisioning engine? Should it sit in different places for different reasons? Should it sit as centrally as close as possible to your core data source, or should it live closer to the end where you're delivering something? Say if you're producing an email and then you're having decisioning at the point of sending the email rather than at the point of where the data is sitting centrally, or do you need both? So I think that's definitely a topic that is more prevalent at the moment.
Well, that's definitely something that's been around for a while, but people, and Mark, you'll know this as well as anyone, people have an enterprise scale really struggled to make that happen, and it's been more on a kind of grand platform transformation scale. You're changing your team's ways of working, ways of thinking, and ways about embedding those kind of decisioning approaches into your business. I feel like now what's happening is that decisioning is becoming more readily available, and actually some vendors are looking at how they can sort of make that smaller and more manageable, easy to digest for a business, and provide value quickly on a smaller outlay, and improve the outcome. And actually, if they do that, that gives them the right to then attack more use cases and gradually layer on further functionality. But that's just more a change in approach than in a hugely different kind of concept.
And I'm really glad to hear you mention ways of working, Neil, because that it is such a big change for people. If I'm a marketer and I've been used to the idea of campaign management, right, and I'm thinking about what are the things I want to say and who do I want to say them to, that is an entirely different way of working to thinking, how do I build up all of these experiences and try to build a system. And by system, I mean more than technology. I mean the technology and the ways of working and the process around all of this that can say, okay, for that customer, given that context and those attributes and this recent event, this is the right thing for them right now. And it's a much less predictable world. You don't know how many volumes you're going to send out at what time, and it's harder to say that I'm going to get exactly this much revenue uplift on that product in this time frame, but you will do better as a business overall. And it's a big mindset shift. And so I think a key part to embedding AI and agents and automated testing and all of this into businesses is making sure that the people on the ground have got that way of thinking and that way of working in the business to actually allow it to happen.
Yeah, I think just back on the decisioning point, one of the biggest challenges we're seeing at the moment is that it's not the actual models and like how content is chosen. It's the gap between the decisioning layer and the activation layer, and actually how are they talking to each other, and then the content management on top of that. I think I spoke to a client last week who were like, we've been doing decisioning for 10 years. Why is it such a buzzword at the moment? And I think it is because we see vendors that are trying to do a lot of it in the same within their platform now. So they're talking about it a lot more. Whereas, like you guys have said previously, decisioning was thought of quite separately, I think, outside of the marketing automation platform.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Chantelle, and I think it's quite amusing in some parts, because when you sort of say it's part of their platform, some of the platforms, I can see a menu option, but actually it's a fully offsite, send us the data. We have a consultancy team who will build out the models and train it and kind of work with you to make sure that it delivers that result that we've promised you will, but it is not an integrated part of the stack, and it's not plug and play. It's something that they've purchased and are kind of pushing, and it may work for clients, and that's great, but it's that makes them a little bit more like some of the traditional marketing hubs and companies are buying features in to eventually integrate into their stack. So it's just the being careful that you understand exactly how the solution works, whether it is all that different to another option basically of using SNRT.
So fast forward a year, we're summarising 2026. Are we going to be having the same conversation, or what are we going to be talking about as everything that's just happened in that last year?
I think technology is going to become sentient and we'll have to worry.
This podcast will be hosted by AI.
And CDPs won't want to ingest messy data, and we'll have to hire a CDP therapist or something because they're now sentient. But just the rate of change is just incredible, isn't it? So I think it's going to be something that we can't even comprehend right now in a year's time, just because of the rate of change. I think this time next year, we'll see that I think we'll now have a lot more case studies to talk about, which is in the new architecture where we will have companies that are benefiting from this concierge type service.
What about away from AI? Do you think there's anything that's going to be a shift in anything over the next year in any other areas?
I think a continued trend of honesty about kind of what companies can achieve with the resources and the budgets that they have. Continuing along that track, I think there will be kind of maybe a simplified org structure in some companies if they can manage it. I think kind of slimming down and making sure that if we are going to use AI, that it's kind of it's being used in a way that helps the business streamline rather than causes complexity.
We'll reach minority report type levels of predictive analytics, but companies will start to know what customers are going to do before they even know about it themselves, which might lead to some interesting use cases.
I have an alternative take. I have a non-AI related one. I think as sadly we are in a slightly more polarized world nowadays. I don't think this is true of everyone, but I certainly think in the younger generations, companies matching their personal values is becoming more important to them, and I don't see that going away. Now, I do think we're at a particular point in history as well that we're not very good at disagreeing with each other, and we're a bit tribal about our thoughts. So I think companies will have to be clear what they stand for sometimes, and I do think companies will risk losing customers if they don't reflect the right sorts of values. I hope that doesn't turn into no one really saying anything because of fear as to how one person might react. But I do think being clear about what your values are as a company, and younger consumers in particular, choosing who they shop with, who they buy from, whose services they take up based on their personal values and their alignment with that, will continue to become bigger. And it'll be interesting to see whether marketing teams, how much of a role they feel they need to take in talking to customers about what they stand for, rather than just what they're selling and what price it is.
Yeah, I can see that. And I can see your kind of, like the artisanal approach with people have kind of worked out how to bake bread to the nth degree and make it sort of last for weeks on end and do it at a high volume, low kind of cost. But you have seen over the years the sourdough brigade and people willing to pay more for a different kind of service. And so maybe you start to see some of these like human curated approaches to things like, when you're talking about travel earlier, Mark, that there's going to be a split into the people that go down the influencer route versus the people that go through the concierge kind of approach. So maybe there's something for us humans there.
And do we still care about sustainability? I mean, I guess I was going to bring it back to AI, but AI is using so much kind of resource and power and that, and it does feel that it certainly felt like a couple of years ago, any big enterprise company was investing in departments around sustainability and how they were being more sustainable. Has the political climate made us stop caring about sustainability, or companies maybe rowing back on some of those sustainable things at the moment?
I think to your point earlier around being like polarized, it's how much of it is being politicized as well. Like how much do people believe? And I think that's part of the problem is people are now so distrusting of information and what's true and what's not. And it's kind of feels like in the last couple of years, it's taken less importance than it did a few years back. And maybe that's because people are not as trusting of the information and doubting it, which is not ideal if it is true.
Authenticity does feel like it's becoming a key word, right? When a brand's selling me something, how true are they being? And I do think we need to remember to be authentic. You can't just stick a strap line on an advert and assume that message is going to get across. You've got to kind of follow through on some of this stuff now, I think, because otherwise you will get found out.
And I think people are interrogating brands and their content more for authenticity now. They know a lot of it is being generated by AI. People will spot it more easily the more they see like AI content, etc.
Cool. I think we've been talking a while. We're almost out of time. So shall we ask the guys our usual closing questions?
Yeah, so we finish on the same question every episode, so we'll still put it to both of you. Who has been the greatest professional influence on your career and why? And what do you think you learned from them?
Probably one of my old bosses, Alex Naseby, used to always tell me, to question everything, why, and curiosity is a real kind of skill, I think, in this industry generally in life. But I think I've always taken that with me wherever I've really worked. That why are we doing this? Not because I don't want to do what's being asked, but often kind of you get into groupthink, or you kind of continue doing the same sort of pattern that people are used to doing. So just taking a step back and clarifying the why for me has always been something that I've looked to do, and I think that's generally something that's been a big kind of influence on how I approach projects and things like that.
I can vouch for that as well. I work very closely with Neil on a lot of things, and he loves the question, loves the why.
Yeah, there's a few people, but I guess the people that come to mind are, again, a first boss I had when I first started working in the city, and he was very kind of disciplined, old school approach, where it was every meeting you go to, you have to have meeting notes afterwards fully typed up, and if you don't, then you're reprimanded. You had to be suited and booted, and if you weren't, you get kicked out of the office, and couldn't have anyone being late for any reason. There's no excuse for being late whatsoever. It was like the height of rudeness as being late for anything. I think just having that those kind of principles instilled early on in my career for making sure that you just get the basics right, which is turn up on time, make sure that you produce good quality documentation that other people can follow afterwards. Make sure that the way you're presenting things is presented in a good way as well. It's just getting the little details right will then lead to better work. So I think that springs to mind. And then, although work with them day to day and give them a lot of stick, but Andrew and Thomas, who started TAP as well, I think worked with them now for 11 years, and they're both very different people, and I learned lots of things from them over the years as well. So I think Andrew's got a very kind of focus on getting things done and trying to focus on what's the next thing you can do that is the thing that's going to add value, or the next action. And I'm naturally more of a procrastinator and will think around things. So I think that's kind of taking that learning just to focus on what's important next and get that thing done has been very beneficial. And then Thomas on the other side is, it's amazing what stuff he knows, because he spent so long going down different rabbit holes on different information, but the way he's able to get information very quickly from different places and then formulate some intelligent response off the back of that has been a key skill to be able to pick up from him as well, which is certainly helpful in our industry. We have to be slightly thinking ahead and slightly making sure that you've got the information available to be able to add value to your client interactions as well. So I think those three people are probably people that spring to mind.
I definitely I've worked with Sam Taverner for a long time as well, and he's I give him a lot of stick, but he's always very good at being a sounding board and getting you to raise up your thinking to more of a client level. Sometimes we can be guilty of getting so into the weeds that we forget about some of the story and how we engage as humans. And so Sam's very good at kind of holding that mirror up and saying, what are we trying to get across for people to understand, and what's going to matter to them? So yeah, he's definitely someone that I've learned that from over the years as well.
Lovely stuff. Well, it's great to have you guys on. Thanks for having a little chit chat.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for listening to the CX Equation.
That was a lovely chat with our colleagues. Well, colleagues sounds so funny, with our friends. There we go again.
Yeah, it was different, wasn't it? Having a chat to two people that we work with most days, I felt like I knew what some of their answers were going to be beforehand, whereas when we've interviewed some of our other guests, we haven't known exactly what they were going to say. But it's always nice to chat, and I enjoy working with James and Neil because they are both incredibly knowledgeable in their areas. So it's always good to get their take on things.
Exactly. It felt like we were just having a chat about the office. But yeah, it was good to have a little wrap up of the year from them. Obviously, there was a lot of talk about AI and where we are with things at the moment, and not necessarily being able to prove the value yet, but people have started to experiment and lay the foundations for next year.
Yeah, it's difficult to avoid conversation about AI in anything at the moment, isn't it? And I can't see that going away in 2026 at all. So as I think in particular Neil was saying, the focus on ensuring that we're actually generating some benefit from it and seeing metric improvement. I really hope that when we are looking back on 2026, it is, as he said, and it's more about, have we proven use cases, and are we getting to see the benefit of implementing AI and having a clear reason for why we're implementing AI.
Not just implementing for the sake of implementing.
Indeed.
The other focus we kind of had was the idea of composable architectures, of a composable MarTech stack. Obviously, previously, we've seen a lot of people have the one-stop shop with the likes of Adobe and Salesforce and other legacy players.
And you're more of a technologist than me. Like, part of me wonders whether, we're just going into the kind of the next phase of architecture, right? And in 3 or 4 more years, it'll be something else. You see these trends come and go, right? Headless, composable, hub, yeah. So, I do think getting your data right as a business is a fundamental thing, right? When the platforms allowed you to get away with not having great data, I understand why that was a benefit, because it meant that you could practically do something right now. But I think we're now seeing that is catching up with companies, and so more focus on getting a good data structure that platforms can sit on is worthwhile.
And then that'll give more autonomy to, marketing teams, or I guess they're coming more marketing technologists now, where they're doing more of the doing than the technical teams used to, and they don't have as much of a dependency on them. So operationally, it works in their favour as well.
Well, great. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this month's episode of the CX Equation, and we will have a great 2026, and we'll see you again next month.
We'll see you next month.
The CX Equation is brought to you by TapCXM. To find out more about what we do and how we can help you, visit tapcxm.com.
And then make sure to search for the CX Equation in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you usually find your podcasts. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes.
On behalf of the team here at TapCXM, thank you for listening.